Straight out of Compton, straight into our minds, NWA. The word that I refuse to say, with attitudes. A name that echoed through the streets, blasted from boom boxes, and shook the very foundation of American culture. A Psyop in a gold chain. Was it all by design? Let's be clear. The issues NWA rapped about were real. Police brutality, poverty, systemic racism. These were the realities of life in places like Compton long before "fuck the police" ever hit the airwaves. But did NWA offer solutions, or did they simply amplify the anger, pushing a narrative of despair and hopelessness? The streets were talking, and NWA was holding the mic. To understand NWA, you have to understand the world they came from. Compton in the 1980s was a pressure cooker of social and economic inequalities. Unemployment was rampant, drugs were readily available, and the police were seen as an occupying force rather than protectors. Before NWA, the roots of rebellion. Before NWA put Compton on the map, gangs weren't a media spectacle. They weren't a marketing tool. They were born out of necessity, a reaction to a system that had failed them time and time again. These weren't just groups of thugs terrorizing neighborhoods for kicks. Many started as social clubs, offering a sense of community and brotherhood amidst the chaos. The misunderstood narrative, from protectors to predators. The media loved to showcase the violence, the drugs, the guns. It was a story that sold, a narrative that reinforced existing prejudices about young black men. But what about the community work some gangs engaged in? The food drives, the neighborhood cleanups, the efforts to protect their own from outside forces. These stories rarely saw the light of day. The truth, as always, was far more complex. Gangsta rap, the soundtrack to a shifting reality. And then came NWA. Their music, raw and unapologetic, gave voice to the anger and frustration simmering in these communities. A profitable narrative, the rise of gangster archetypes. The message was clear, authenticity sold. The rougher, the tougher, the more real you were, the more records you'd move. And young black artists, many from these very same communities, were thrust into this pressure cooker of expectation. The Rodney King Uprising, a city on fire, fueled by fury. 1992. Los Angeles burned. The acquittal of 4 LAPD officers in the brutal beating of Rodney King, a black man pulled over for a traffic violation, was the match thrown onto a powder keg of racial tension. The world watched in horror as the videotape, captured by a bystander, played out on television screens. "Fuck the Police" becomes an anthem, validating the rage. In the aftermath of the riots, one song became synonymous with the anger and frustration of a generation. NWA's "Fuck the Police." Released 3 years prior, the song had already drawn the ire of law enforcement and conservative groups. But after the Rodney King beating and the subsequent uprising, it took on a whole new level of resonance. Exploiting the anger, did gangsta rap offer solutions or fuel the fire? NWA tapped into a vein of raw emotion that resonated deeply within Black America. Their music gave voice to the pain, the anger, the frustration of a community grappling with poverty, violence, and systemic racism. But did they offer solutions, or did they simply exploit these emotions for profit? A generation divided. NWA's complex legacy. NWA's legacy is a complicated one. They were both products and architects of their time, reflecting and shaping the cultural landscape of late 20th century America. A nation divided. The backlash against gangsta rap. America wasn't ready for NWA. Their music, raw and confrontational, ripped open the carefully constructed facade of a nation grappling with its own internal demons. Here was a group of young black men straight out of Compton telling the world their truth, unfiltered and unapologetic. Politicians and pundits, the war of words escalates. The political establishment, never one to miss an opportunity to exploit social anxieties, seized upon the gangsta rap phenomenon with fervor. From the Oval Office to the halls of Congress, NWA became public enemy number one, a convenient scapegoat for the nation's ills. President George H.W. Bush, in his infamous 1989 speech, declared a war on drugs that would disproportionately target black and brown communities. The crusade against gangsta rap wasn't confined to the halls of power. It infiltrated living rooms across America, fueled by a media machine that thrived on sensationalism and fear-mongering. Talk show host Geraldo Rivera, never one to shy away from controversy, dedicated countless hours of airtime to demonizing gangsta rap, inviting a parade of hand-wringing experts and reformed gang members to denounce the genre's alleged evils. The parental advisory sticker, introduced in 1985 as a way to alert parents to potentially objectionable content, became a badge of honor for gangsta rap artists, a symbol of their defiance in the face of censorship. But in their zeal to protect America from the perceived threat of gangsta rap, politicians and pundits inadvertently gave the genre a level of power and influence that it might not have otherwise achieved. The more they tried to censor it, the more it resonated with a generation of young people who felt unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. By turning NWA into folk devils, they inadvertently made them martyrs for a cause, symbols of resistance against a system that many young people believed was rigged against them. The message was clear: if the powers that be are this afraid of our music, it must be saying something important. The attempt to silence NWA and their peers backfired spectacularly, turning gangsta rap into a cultural phenomenon that would leave an indelible mark on American society. It was a testament to the power of music to transcend boundaries, to give voice to the voiceless, and to challenge the status quo, even when met with fierce opposition. Before the drive-bys and the colors, before the media painted them as monsters, before the Bloods and the Crips were born out of a need for protection, a longing for belonging. Imagine South Central LA in the 60s. The civil rights movement was shaking the nation, but opportunity hadn't quite trickled down to these neglected streets. Young black men yearning for a piece of the American dream found themselves shut out, ignored. The Black Panthers, with their message of self-reliance and armed resistance, offered a model. But as the Panthers were systematically targeted, infiltrated, and dismantled, a void emerged. Into this void stepped groups like the Baby Avenues, eventually evolving into the Crips, offering protection and a sense of brotherhood. But power, even on the streets, is a fickle mistress. Rivalries formed, turf wars erupted. What began as a shield against a hostile world morphed into a battle for survival, a blood-soaked struggle for dominance that would consume entire neighborhoods. Bitches ain't shit misogyny as a marketing tool. NWA's lyrics weren't just about police brutality and gang violence. They were often laced with a venomous misogyny that would become a disturbing hallmark of the genre. Women were relegated to bitches and hoes, objects to be controlled, exploited, and discarded. Was this a reflection of the harsh realities of street life, where survival often trumped sensitivity? Or was it a calculated move, a cynical exploitation of sexism to sell records to a generation of young men hungry for an identity, even if it meant embracing toxic masculinity? The music industry, with its long history of objectifying women, wasn't about to stand in the way of a profitable formula. In fact, they encouraged it, pushing artists to embrace the most extreme, most shocking, most misogynistic versions of themselves. And so, a generation of young black men were fed a steady diet of music that devalued and degraded women, normalizing disrespect and violence as the price of manhood. The war on drugs, fanning the flames of destruction. As NWA's music spread like wildfire through America's urban centers, a parallel force was wreaking havoc on black and brown communities: the war on drugs. Launched with much fanfare by President Reagan in the 1980s, this war wasn't about public health. It was about social control. Crack cocaine, cheap and highly addictive, ravaged inner cities, fueling gang violence and tearing families apart. But the response from law enforcement was swift and brutal, not to help those caught in the throes of addiction, but to punish them. Mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses skyrocketed, disproportionately impacting black and brown men. Neighborhoods were transformed into battlegrounds, patrolled by heavily armed police officers with little understanding of the communities they were sworn to protect. The war on drugs created a perverse incentive structure. It criminalized poverty, fueled mass incarceration, and turned a generation of young black men into easy targets for a system that saw them as disposable. A culture under siege, NWA's America. This was the America that birthed NWA, where the police were seen as an occupying force. To understand NWA's impact, we must understand their context. It was a time of profound social and political upheaval. NWA's music became a soundtrack to this era of urban unrest. Their lyrics reflected the anger and frustration of a generation. Cashing in on chaos, the business of gangsta rap. While politicians demonized gangsta rap, it sold big. Record labels struck gold, profiting from the streets. The rougher the roar, the more records sold. NWA's success spawned new artists, both street and manufactured. Controversy sold. Violence, drugs, misogyny, marketing tools sold back to communities. From street corners to Wall Street, the unlikely winners. The money flowed. But who was really benefiting? Some artists escaped the ghetto, traded in their bandanas for mansions and Bentleys. For every success story, countless others were left behind by a system valuing profit over people. The real winners were the record labels, distributors, and media conglomerates. They weren't interested in solutions, only in turning pain into profit. The streets became a commodity, a source of endless content to be sold back to the masses. Numbers don't lie. The devastating toll on Black America. The human cost of this manufactured chaos was staggering. While gangsta rap blasted through boomboxes and MTV, black communities were being ravaged by the very forces this music claimed to represent. The war on drugs, fueled by racist policies and draconian sentencing guidelines, had transformed neighborhoods into war zones, decimated families, and created a pipeline from the cradle to the prison cell. Homicide rates in black communities skyrocketed. Young black men were being incarcerated at alarming rates, their lives forever altered by a system that saw them as disposable. But these statistics, these human tragedies, were rarely mentioned in the boardrooms where the profits were counted, or in the studios where the next gangsta rap hit was being recorded. They were an inconvenient truth, a side effect of a lucrative business that thrived on the very real pain of a community it claimed to represent. Unpacking the damage. These weren't just statistics, they were human lives, families torn apart by poverty, violence, and despair. It's simplistic to blame NWA or gangsta rap alone, but they shaped the cultural landscape. The glorification of violence and materialism had a profound impact on a generation. Were NWA and peers manipulated by forces profiting from black community destruction? The legacy of gangsta rap is a complex mix, reflecting and shaping our world. The echo of Fuck the Police, a legacy of anger and accountability. We've walked through the flames of Compton, felt the heat of the LA riots, and heard the echoes of Fuck the Police reverberating through generations. NWA's music wasn't just a soundtrack, it was a mirror reflecting a fractured America back at itself. But mirrors can distort. And the image NWA reflected, while rooted in the very real anger and frustration of Black America, was often magnified, exaggerated, and commodified by forces eager to profit from the chaos. The question isn't whether NWA was right or wrong, it's about accountability. Did their music, born out of genuine pain, inadvertently contribute to the very problems they were rapping about? Did the glorification of violence and misogyny, even in the name of keeping it real, come at a cost to the community they claim to represent? The answers are complex, uncomfortable, and require a level of honesty that many are still afraid to confront. Can we rewrite the narrative? So where do we go from here? Can we acknowledge the pain and systemic failures without glorifying the destructive byproducts? It starts with understanding. The anger didn't disappear when the music stopped. It's about investing in those communities, providing opportunities beyond the recording studio, dismantling systems of oppression, rewriting the narrative. Thanks for watching another episode of Hip Hop Disclosure. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.